All right, I think we're live. Can you believe it?
Yay, we're here.
It's another week,
Such such
another
excitement.
another mediocre stream coming in hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks people for joining out of the podcast today because I think we did last week and not a huge amount of stuff has changed, but there's a lot of just general stuff that I think we can talk about
Yeah,
and I don't know if it was in our plan, but at some point we probably should talk about some of the Gene Stealer cult models.
we
Maybe
really
that can
should.
be
I think
next podcast.
that should be for a real podcast, I think.
Is at least I think has gone up. Though I think this weekend is going to go up on pre-orders, so perhaps that will be a good thing for the podcast to talk about sort of all the new Gene Stealer cult stuff and how um, they sort of
Yeah.
affect the range, particularly when they have all the better images and the 360 views and such. Because I think this week stuff went on pre-order, but it's
All right, Eric, just a
primarily
minute. So, this might be a rough stream. It looks like my internet connection is really rocking back and forth. Like,
mm,
I don't know if it's gonna cut. Like, it's not as bad as some of the times, but it's
we still streaming.
we're still streaming. But it
Okay.
says right now it's been going in and out of really bad, and up to 42% of the frames have been dropped. Oop,
Ooh, that's rough.
there we got an error. And now the speed's back up high again. Like, I don't know. We may as well continue with the stream, but there's a chance it could end, and then it'll try and pick it
That's
back up.
Comcast.
Yeah, thanks, Comcast.
Comcast. If anyone's on the East Coast of
America.
the United States,
Yeah.
you have to deal with Comcast. They suck. Hell, that's why I'm no longer. I initially tried to do all the hosting for the streams, and Comcast is so shitty. Thought maybe yours would be better, and I think it is, Adam,
I
but it's
think it is
still.
better. Like, it looks like we're getting better now. It doesn't mean it's not gonna cut again. I mean, it might be
Hopefully,
raining. It might be raining outside. That might be the cause.
Yeah,
um,
that sounds like Comcast.
yeah, it's Comcast for you. But yeah, Eric, as Eric was saying, I think today's just gonna be a relatively laid back general chat about things. Probably a little bit about the Horus Heresy Weekender that just happened. And then maybe in a future episode when we record a podcast, we'll probably talk more about the new Gene Stealer cultist models coming out. Um, Vaguely related to that, I think one of the things in the coming months, hopefully within the next month or two, I think I'm going to try and convert one of those Gene Stealer cultist commanders, like the little gunslinger, you know him?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know what the
yeah.
fuck that's called. It's in one of the Kill Team whatever boxes, I think. I think I'm gonna
Yeah.
convert a cool one of him because the official models, I'm not loving
And your
it.
thought is to just convert it out of just any Gene Stealer cult model?
Yeah, and actually
Is
make it
that?
cool.
Because yeah, I think actually this weekend they released a box set, a Kill Team box set that includes him and maybe a unit of
Oh, so did they actually
the
release it? Let's go. I'm gonna try and find it. We'll want to look more at that
stuff that was
model.
released this week was that, and I believe they released that Kill Team with the Adeptus Mechanicus, that new Magos thing, the floating thing.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like these $65 box sets.
Was
And
that
Adeptus,
released or pre-order?
it was released. It's like a new release.
Oh, so it was actually
But I guess they have a little bit of terrain, a box set of 5 models, like for the Adeptus Mechanicus. It's a set of Rust Stalkers, which honestly,
my god.
some of these
Games
kill
Workshop site is so bad. Like,
it's not a it's hard to find stuff at times. I'll put you a link to one of them, although I guess
was
admittedly
just trying to fucking find that. Oh, I found it. It's odd.
yeah, but it's not always the best. But these sets, the kill team sort of sets, don't seem like too bad a deal in the sense that you get a little bit of terrain, you get one of the box sets, and I mean I assume these Rust Stalkers are at least $40 to $50. Then
So
the leader and
you
a
know, the
bunch
little
of tokens.
gunslinger, he's pretty cool, but I think, you know what really what makes him look a lot worse is his like really broad stance. It like makes him
Yeah.
it really like makes him look squat and like dwarf like. It really and if he was just like standing up tall, I think he'd look a lot better.
I almost think like maybe we'll talk about it when we talk more about all the releases, like all the Gene Stealer Cult releases. But I feel most of the character models don't look bad, but they look perhaps a little bit more comical than they would need to. Their pose is kind of weird, weapons large, and just they don't. I don't know. They don't seem to have the same level of finesse as maybe just some of the regular Gene Stealer Cult releases.
Yeah, no,
Like
they look a little
particularly,
clumsier to me.
there's the one assassin, or I don't know what it is actually called, but
Oh,
this assassin model that looks from the new Gene Stealer Cult stuff. I don't know, it just doesn't look particularly good. It even has a
Sanctus.
weapon.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not.
it even has like a weaponed option with a sniper rifle of some sort that also looks kind of poor.
It's really
And,
comical looking. Their paint job doesn't help, but like, and they seem to almost accentuate. They made the hands of him like even bigger. His like face, his yelling face looks really strange. And then yeah, what is kind of cool. They actually have a variant with a sniper rifle, and the sniper rifle I feel is maybe one of the better sniper rifles Games Workshop has ever
yeah,
made. It's sized pretty well for like a really large caliber sniper rifle. The only thing that sort of kills it, like he's not shooting it, and yet he's pulling the trigger. So I guess he's firing off a victory shot, like, "Hey guys, this is my position. Come get me," or something.
I don't know. To me, it really looks like these models were designed by
Yeah, I don't know, man.
some who were like they don't look like Darren Latham things, for example. Although I mean, certain parts look pretty good,
I mean,
but their
overall they're
poses seem
good,
very
but
broad and. But in like looking at the Sanctus thing, his cloak, like it's so fat at the end.
yeah, that's
Like
weird.
compared to like the Silver Tower stuff, where I mean, I guess Silver Tower. I actually meant Blackstone Fortress, where the robes were very crisp and thin in a lot of cases. This, they're so fat. His hands are sort of fat. His legs are super broad pose.
His feet
Um,
even look bigger.
yeah, I
God,
feel like
no, it's
everything looks like it is more characterized
they
than
decided they
perhaps
really wanted to go
a
heavy
lot of the
into
Gene Stealer Cult stuff.
yeah, they really wanted to go
Although I
heavily into
think,
the heroic scale, even more so than normal.
yeah, I think part of it though, why it makes it look worse to me though, like having that little Gene Stealer Cult thing in the background, like his good mascot buddy, like I think that sort of breaks the continuity of the model and sort of removes this idea of him being this master of stealth or something.
What I think a good you can liken this to, they're trying to turn the relatively serious Gene Stealer cults and stuff into Nurgle. This is what they would do. This is what they do with the Nurgle range, I feel. just like lots of little other characters and critters that are kind of comical. Like it's really
Yeah.
weird. Like
All the
and that the
goggles and
Gene
stuff
Stealer
really look
thing,
like Splinter Cell.
the Gene Stealer thing might be okay, but if he didn't have the head goggle harness thing, like why does it have that? And then he has like almost like a bulbous belly that he's like pressing into the pipe. It's a mess.
Yeah, I guess admittedly, you could just not put that on and ice
Thankfully.
in and just, well, that's fine. Well, I guess we're already talked a lot
That
about.
sniper rifle's great. Like I think that sniper rifle, if you cut off like the toxin container bullshit on the bottom, and you probably have to make some other modifications to it. Like maybe, ideally, you'd move the pistol grip up closer to the main body of the rifle. There's too much space in there.
Yeah, that would help.
But like if you did all of that, like it's a good weapon that like you could put on so many different models. Like that'll work. That would work great for like a Space Marine. Probably best on a Space Marine, really. Actually, let's think about this again. Is the scope... Is it seated back too far? Maybe not. It's getting close, though.
It's getting close, but I feel you could, if you want, you could shave a little off it, and it'd probably be okay.
It's probably too close for him to wear those goggles, so he'd have to take them off, otherwise he'd be banging into his face. So I don't know. Yeah, I think all of the characters are kind of a miss for me.
Yeah, I like aspects of them, but...
The only one that's good is and we'll talk more about this on the podcast, is the motorbike girl with the sniper rifle.
Yeah, she's good.
Alright, let's go back to the Horus Heresy Weekender. This, I think, was a pretty interesting event, and, like, it wasn't... I feel, to me, it, like, came up, like, kind of unannounced, and I wasn't even aware it was happening until, like, the Friday before, and it's like, oh, it's this weekend. And I guess there were hints at them showing Sanguinius, or whatever, earlier, so maybe that should have been the hint, but...
we should have basically known it was existing, but not actually in the UK when one could conceivably get it, it's hard to be like, oh, they released tickets for this, like, let's get them, like, without that sort of impetus. So I think, admittedly, I think there was like £70 for a ticket.
Yeah, it was
pretty
a lot.
expensive.
It seems weird to me. And then, like, they had, like, panels and stuff, apparently. And, like, you needed, like, a ticket or something to get into it. And, like, they were handing them out, and they ran out of the tickets for people to go.
I think
so you paid, like, a lot of money and then can't even attend most of the shit. So, like, that seems a little weird.
Yeah, I think they sort of changed. I guess Forge World, I think, used to have their own sort of setup and people to run their events, and maybe that's slightly changed, such that, I don't know. Hopefully they work that out better in the future, but...
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the Horus Heresy Weekender, and it wasn't, I guess, all Horus Heresy. There was some Necromunda stuff, but like...
But I mean, I guess that's like Forge World now, like...
Yeah, it's almost just like a Forge World thing.
Or like Necromunda, like what you would consider like the specialist game stuff and Horus Heresy models.
Yeah.
And not really a lot of Horus Heresy models.
No.
Or Necromunda, really. But, I guess let's talk about some of the not Necromunda, though. Horus Heresy models. They released a bunch of new White Scar stuff. And I don't know. I feel it was an interesting weekend. Like, it was probably, most of it was showcased by the release of Simon Egan's new Prime Arch model, which kind of highlights a lot of problems with the Horus Heresy range. Whereas like Sanguinius and like the other Prime Arch models, particularly the ones that Simon Egan has sculpted, they sort of highlight the notion that Simon is taking these models and he's like reworking the proportion and anatomy and having more of a serious and artistic tone and touch to the models, so they all look really good, even if you don't like some of their poses or stuff like that. They're good models, and then you have them, and then they're standing right beside their the traditional Space Marine models with the bad heroic proportions, the lack of abdomens, and everything, and it's a really stark contrast, and to the point where almost like until Forge World adopts the Primaris Space Marine like body proportions, I feel nearly every single Horus Heresy release in terms of their infantry is just gonna kind of look comical.
I feel that they have for a long time, but yeah, because it's
They
a
have.
weird dichotomy that Forge World, their Horus Heresy thing with like their black books, all of them are very kind of detail oriented, talking about just the campaigns and all these battles, and they're very serious take on things as though they're
Yeah.
recounting a war. And then a lot of the tanks and stuff that they make are very like nice, sort of realistic looking. They try to, when they're painted, they try to do a lot of weathering. And then, as you were saying, Adam, Simon Egan's Primarch models in particular, they do a lot to kind of add elements of realism there. They do less of the comical caricatured, like back to the drawing board to make physical anatomy and stuff look more realistic and reasonable. And all of that gives together to support this idea of the Horus Heresy, a more grim realism sort of around there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people like that aspect about the Heresy, but that's
Mm-hmm.
all kind of like thrown flat on its face with most of the infantry models. And I mean, this has been for all 7 or 8 years that the Horus Heresy has been a thing.
Yeah.
Some better or worse, but looking at, and I guess, yeah, just looking at these new White Scar
Yeah, just
models,
look at
and
the new White Scar models. They have the two like Praetor models, one in Terminator armor and one in power armor, and I don't know, they just look bad. Like the Terminator, his arms are not attached to his body; they're attached above his shoulders. His legs are way too far apart. Lots of big, blocky, bad looking details. He has this like hawk thing that looks, it looks bad. His arms are really short. And then what's probably even worse is the one in power armor. He's kind of like dancing. His like
yeah, his
legs are
glaive
really
thing looks,
thin. And then all of that,
his
and
glaive looks dumb.
he doesn't have a torso. Like, where the fuck is his torso? At least his legs aren't
His
spread
head's
apart.
gigantic.
He's not
That's
squatting.
true. Like their weapons are gigantic, like the Terminator one. The combi weapon looks huge and stupid, like as big as his armored torso. I mean, they look like a mess.
Yeah, they look
And I mean,
awful.
admittedly, if they just went somewhat of a Primaris scale for like the anatomy for the Marine and the Terminator and stuff, or even if they went sort of like some of the Custode Terminator sort of models,
Mm-hmm.
which weren't perfect but were better, it would strengthen this immensely. even if the details and such are still kind of phoned in, like, because a lot of these are like those um,
Mm-hmm.
three ponytail sort of things on the Terminator armor one. Like, just there's no finesse in any of
And
that.
they're like blowing one way, and then like the little tassel on his holstered sword's blown another way. Like it's just
They're
didn't
just,
spend any
yeah,
time
they look
on this.
lazy. They look lazy, and then with the bad proportions, like, just makes them just, yeah, comical, which is not what the Primarch models look like.
Oh, and then I
And then, I
think,
mean,
yeah, I was gonna say on top of all of this, I think the model that really showcases that the best is what I think is the chapter Ralderon, who I think is following the death of Sanguinus. He becomes the chapter master. They have this new model of this character, and to me, he looks like a dwarf.
I
And
mean, what's interesting is a lot of aspects of this model aren't bad.
yeah, I mean,
Like,
this
the
is
details
sculpted
are
better. The
relatively
details
fine
look
and
better.
crisp. It's done pretty well. Like, he looks like he might have a bolt or flamer combat weapon that looks kind of good.
Hmm.
Like, so many elements of it look relatively good, but like, and this angle minimizes it slightly. But if you look, like, there are some pictures online of unpainted versions, and if you look at him on his side, like, he, like, literally is just a rib cage attached directly to his hips with that gigantic head. No no room for stomach, no room for kidneys or intestines, none of that.
All right,
Just
I found the picture of the unpainted version of the model, like another angle, and it does an
okay.
incredible job of, yeah, kind of pointing to what you're talking about. Like he
Like,
literally doesn't have a body. Where is it?
that is so, like,
It's his
he's
neck is
it's just
almost
so
attached.
caricatured.
Yeah, his neck is almost attached to his hips.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, it is so incredibly caricatured. Like, you just, how could you take this seriously? And then that, like, you put that next, because the thing is, like, again, like, this is even the person who did this, there's talent there. Like, a lot of
yeah,
elements are good, but like, this design decision to stick with the Space Marine sort of anatomy, like, just completely destroys the model.
and I feel
And
this like they dialed the Space Marine shitty anatomy to the next level, and like
yeah,
made it even more caricatured, because like some of the Horus Heresy character series, like they don't necessarily keep to the Space Marine proportions and anatomy quite as much, and like some of those
well, even
models
those
look
White
better.
Scar models that we just looked at, like the Terminator one, the head has to be smaller than the head for this model. And
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
that could
yeah.
help.
So yeah, I mean, if this
I don't
model,
know.
if his head was a time or two smaller, it would look better.
Also, just attached higher,
That
like,
too.
such that the neck was like, all that could help.
But
Well,
I think
I don't know.
this,
I mean,
yeah.
this does
Oh god.
does get back to this weird dichotomy that, and it's, I guess you can really see it on the Primarch models, in the sense that a lot of them, their scenic bases have just normal Space Marines on there,
Yeah, they
that,
do.
and they're just so different looking. And like, it doesn't just look like, oh, the Primarch's like a beast of a man or something, like super large and powerful. Like, they look like things from completely different universes.
Yeah,
One
they do.
one's like has some attention to detail and realism. The other's like this comical mess, and they're just like thrown together with very little thought, or seemingly no thought.
They don't
And I
fit
was
well.
talking to you earlier, Adam, but it almost seems like you could have replaced those Space Marines with like Lego minifigs, and it wouldn't lose anything.
I
It
don't
would
think. Yeah.
still look as jarring and weird as And I think that's just so much about Forge World stuff is there's just this huge dichotomy between different elements that doesn't jive very well together. The realism and attention to detail that the books like Alan Bly sort of helped impart into the books and Simon Egan's Primarchs and all the incredible vehicles and stuff.
Hmm.
Then with like the Night Lord, the newer Night Lord models, or like those some of those Space Wolf models and such. And it's like, what is all this? But I guess towards that end too, though, I kind of feel bad for Forge World in the sense that they're probably kind of between a rock and a hard place in that they
Yeah.
probably feel a little stuck that like, well, we have to keep, we basically have to keep this Space Marine look, this weird caricatured look that they've had for so many years, because they feel like they're not Games Workshop. They can't just completely change stuff all the time. So,
Hmm.
and then even if they had wanted to start to do that a little bit and shift a little bit more towards better proportions and stuff, now that Games Workshop has released Primaris Marines, I feel there would just be an outcry. Oh no, you're adding Primaris to 30K, rah rah rah. Such that now, like they literally just can't do it.
Hmm. Well, so one thing
So
that's
like
interesting, they also showed pictures of like maybe some Space Wolf Horus Heresy Destroyer Squad or something, and they're probably one of the better Space Wolf releases in a while. Like they have the like wolf skull helmets that look pretty good, and these I think kind of
mhm,
um their poses are really bad. Like one's like, well, they're like
doing a jig in the background.
line dancing or something. But aside from that, the models look better when you can't see their hit. They're like they need helmets because if they have helmets, then there's at least some. You could convince yourself that maybe their heads inside there aren't quite as big, and then their lack of an abdomen works a little better.
hmm
I mean, they still look rough, but my favorite is
It
the one
yeah,
doing
you
the
could.
jig in the back. Like that is a weird pose. And then one other thing that's always interesting, a lot of the Space Marine feet are really clumsy looking. Like they're just big, bulbous, lack of articulation, and like they really look comical, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, they do. Well, there's isn't there a picture somewhere on this thing just showing like a Dark Angel and maybe a
Oh, like the
Night
artwork.
Lord from one of the newer books?
I'll
Yeah,
try
that
and
like
find
a
it.
lot of effort was put in there to make the armor look so much real and this and that and like looks good, but it sure does show that like wow,
Right.
dude, does the normal Space Marine sort of look so weird and ridiculous. Like they have feet so big
Yeah, the
that
feet
I
the
mean,
feet are too
admittedly, that
big.
they've always been like that is usually a thing that is large with Space Marines and it's part of their look. But I feel this is dialed up a little bit more. And then particularly looking at the Dark Angel one, like with the feet dialed up a little bit and then them tapering out so thin such that
The
like
legs, yeah.
the Marine in there probably is like pencil thin legs
Well, so I think a big
that
problem with the Space Marine, the normal Space Marine models could be improved tremendously if their heads were seated a little higher, I think.
if they made them the helmets smaller and seated the heads higher, it would help a lot. Which are there
Because
still you can argue that oh the heads like they're just gigantic helmets and their
but
heads.
their
I mean
eye
you could
levels
potentially
then
argue
wrong,
that
I think.
it yeah
The
it,
eye the
it
eye
is.
levels wrong
Well,
with
and
where their shoulders
interestingly,
and stuff are.
that is an interesting point because like the Primaris Marines, a lot of the components like the arms and helmets and
Yeah,
things of
they're the
that nature,
same.
backpacks weren't really changed in a
Yeah.
dramatic way, such as you could switch things and the shoulder pads and such. With that said, though, the Primaris heads and helmets are still smaller
Yeah, they are a little
than
smaller.
normal Space Marine helmets, and they're a little bit taller, and they the scale seems better and more, and I think helps the general image of the Marines more than if they would have just used a normal Space Marine helmet all the time. So like, but yeah, as I was saying, as much as we're kind of complaining and thinking about how Forge World's normal Marines look so bad and the Primaris ones helped a lot, the fact that GW released Primaris as Primaris and not just like, hey, we're slowly reworking Space Marines to look even cooler or something makes it such that I feel Forge World can't do anything. I mean, I guess they with like the Gal Vorbach models, they certainly made them larger, but I guess they kind of could get away like, oh, they're demonic warped or something, so that's why they're bigger. But it's still kind of a shame. Why couldn't they just start doing that regardless? Just make better proportion Marines do their own thing rather than just pumping out the same kind of bad looking Marine armor marks with like different detail tacked on.
Yeah, I just can't get behind
Which, I
them.
mean, I like all the old armor marks. It's just they're not done well.
They don't look good. Ugh.
Yeah,
They don't look good.
there are a
But then
bunch of White Scar.
I
I'll
was gonna
continue,
say when
Adam.
Games Workshop went and made some plastic variants of some of the older armor marks, they like improved them tremendously. While still
They are a
maintaining
lot better.
they still maintain the bad Space Marine anatomy, but like there's much more consistency with like
Yeah.
bulkier pauldrons and legs and stuff, and they look a lot better than the Forge World
So that was a
variety.
big boon for the 30K community, even though probably some people were upset, like, oh, they're no longer resin, not purists or whatever. But that did help things.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they also released or have some pictures of some White Scar dreadnoughts, Contemptor, and a
Mm-hmm.
Leviathan dreadnought that look okay. I mean, I feel it's just one of the things every time a new chapter they're working on, they obviously have to make some dreadnought variants just because those models sell. Partially because they're cool looking, and partially probably because while they're expensive, like everything in Forge World's expensive, they're still not like $2,000 like some of the larger Forge World vehicles.
They look bad. Like I don't know
I
why
think
you'd ever want these compare. I would just get
they seem really phoned in.
the basic the original
Like,
variants and
to me, it looks so much like they just took some like CAD designs of some Chaos Marauder models from like old Warhammer stuff, like some of their shields and
just put them in
tassels
there.
and
Put them
belts,
in.
and just like I clicked them in and added like a
Particularly at the
lightning
like
bolt
groined
here.
area of the Contemptor and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and even then, like, oh, let's put a generic like top knot on top of this thing here. Like, we'll kind of make it look like it's not centered properly, and we'll make it look not very good, and just we'll just put it up there because we need to do
I don't know. So one
something.
thing that's interesting, like a lot of the Horus Heresy imagery, particularly with like the vehicles and stuff, are trying to take more of like a realistic scale modeling
Hmm.
World War I, World War II kind of look with their paint scheme, like a lot of kind of like block colors, a lot of weathering, um, a
Yeah.
lot of mud and grime and rust and street, all that type of stuff. And then a lot of these like contemptors and stuff with all this extra blingy detail tacked on top, it almost like it just goes against that whole mentality of like
Mm-hmm.
war is hell, like grim darkness type shit, which is kind of it's interesting. Like I don't, yeah, I
Look
don't,
at it. Look at this dreadnought base.
they
If
just didn't
that's not
try
the
at all.
base,
They didn't try at all. They put some flocking, some like sand on the
like that
base,
is,
they colored it one color, dry brushed it, and then probably put like a wash on it, and that was it. But I mean,
yeah,
some
that is
they didn't spend
fucking
any time.
lazy.
But the one thing that's interesting, that's interesting about it, you could imagine if they are fighting in some like desert wastes or something, like there really wouldn't be a lot on the ground other than the
Yeah,
ground.
that's true.
So in that sense, it's kind of fitting, but it they could have done something like maybe make the ground look uneven, like track marks or something. Right? They
Or if
look
they, I
bad.
feel even if just a little of it, use like some of the crackle paint and some of the
Yeah, they'd look a
sand
lot
to make
better.
it. But yeah, the Leviathan, like it looks cool in some sense, but that's just because the Leviathan dreadnought looks cool. Like all the
Is there a
elements
lot?
added to this,
Oh wait, that is what
isn't
it's
that what they
called. That's
call it?
what
The
it's
big
called.
one? Like
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
about it makes it better. I don't think. It's just different. So yeah, just unimpressive. Unimpressive. Like,
I mean, if you have a White Scar army, like, and you want a bunch of contemptors, sure, you could buy one of them. It'll look a little different. That's fine. But in some regards, part of part of the appeal of the Horus Heresy to me is the notion that it's a setting that really allows you to go into the whole mindset of legions and legions of space marines, tons of them. They all kind of look the same and they're battered,
yeah,
war torn armor and stuff. It's like they look the same. They don't necessarily have a lot of obvious
yeah.
individuality. So very much like the kind of like World War